You've been looking for an EV. Should you get a OneWheel or should you get an electric skateboard? Today, we're gonna help you answer that question. We are so close to 50,000 subscribers. So please subscribe and like the video. But also, once we get to 50,000 subscribers, we are gonna have a giveaway. We're gonna be giving away free merch, and all you have to do to get that free merch is either DM me on Instagram your address and we will ship you something, or send me a self-addressed envelope stamped and we will take that and we'll send stuff back to you. Check the description for all the details, but we're really excited about it and we were trying to think of a good way to celebrate. I was like, what better way than just giving away free merch? So check it out. The main differences that I see between a OneWheel and an electric skateboard are going to be the types of terrain that they can traverse, as well as their maneuverability. The OneWheel's one big wheel allows it to go off-road, ride on trails. Do you live in a city that has horrible streets like I do? It's gonna handle those a lot better. It can give you a softer ride. So you might be thinking, hey, if those are some things that I want, then I'm gonna be leaning more towards the OneWheel. Now they do make electric skateboards that do have bigger wheels that are belt driven. I have not tried one of those. I am comparing this specifically to a more street longboard electric skateboard because those are more popular. The ones with the big tires and that are belt driven are kind of specific for off-road. The OneWheel can do both. It can be on-road or off-road, and then in general, electric skateboards are gonna be on-road. Just based on terrain, you might say, okay, case closed, I'm going with the OneWheel, but not so fast. The OneWheel these days are between $1,000 and $2,200, depending on which one you're gonna get. So the Pint is $1,050. The Pint X, which I have, is $1,400, and then the GT, which is their newest one, and it's the highest level one, is $2,200. Those are some incredibly high costs. On the other hand, electric skateboards, because there's tons of different manufacturers, they're not patented like the OneWheel design is. So the OneWheel is kind of the only manufacturer who has the OneWheel design in that setup, I should say. Skateboard, you got tons of competition. You can get a very decent skateboard like the one that I have, which I'll get into, for about $500. So you're looking at half, maybe even a quarter of the cost of a OneWheel. The electric skateboard that I'm riding these days is called a Possway T3. They did send it to me for free, but have no input whatsoever on this video. That board can do 30 plus miles an hour, depending on your weight. I get about 25 miles an hour at max speed. It also has a range, depending on your weight, of 15 to 20 miles. I consistently get 14 miles. It also heavily depends on how you're riding the thing. So if you're like smashing the throttle nonstop, obviously you're gonna get less distance, but I can average 14 miles on a single charge. And again, I can get all the way up to 25 miles an hour, which is way faster than I'm comfortable doing. And keep in mind, this thing is $500, so it's half to a quarter the cost of a OneWheel. Now, let's keep in mind, let's do some comparisons here. So the OneWheel Pint is, like I said, $1,050. It has a top speed of 16 miles an hour and has a 6 to an 8 mile range. The Pint X, which is the one that I have, has a top speed of 18 miles an hour and gives you a range of 12 to 18 miles. The GT, which is a huge step up, $2,200, has a top speed of 20 miles an hour, and they claim a 20 to 32 mile range. So those are the kind of the cost comparisons. I'll put this stuff up on the screen for you here, just to show you that for $500 these days, you can get a very good electric skateboard versus a OneWheel. Now, most electric skateboards are longboards, and at least for me, they're not very maneuverable. The OneWheel, I can carve and cut around things and turn on a dime, and the longboard has a really big turning radius. At least that's the way that I can operate it. So not nearly as nimble. But in the way that I ride, in the places that I ride, that's not super important to me. I'm not going off-road, and I also don't need to be whipping and making these really tight turns. I have the capability and the space to make wider turns. So for me, the cost is more important. And also, I mentioned this in my last video and I got some hate for it, but the safety thing. I'm much more comfortable on a longboard than I am the OneWheel. I've ridden the OneWheel. I've probably got over 100 miles on the OneWheel now, and I'm comfortable. But it just feels like one of these days I'm gonna take a hard fall. And almost every YouTube video I've watched, like other reviewers doing it, they always have a clip of them taking a hard fall. And I understand for some people, that's not gonna matter and it's not gonna scare them off. And it didn't scare me off. I still got it, I still enjoy it. It is a great product and it's incredibly fun, but it does feel like eventually I'm gonna take a really hard fall. I don't love that idea. I know that can still happen, of course, on the longboard skateboard, but I just feel so much more confident on the longboard because if something happened, if I lost power, if something shorted out with the battery, it's like, it's still a skateboard. I'm not gonna just fall off if that happens. On the OneWheel, if something happens with the control board or the battery or whatever, that board is what's keeping you upright. So if something happens, you're going down and you also only have that one wheel. So I just want to mention that again. I know there's people that are going to disagree and that's totally fine. If you're comfortable with that, absolutely. OneWheel. If not, I'm just letting you know that I am definitely much more comfortable on a longboard. Another pro of the OneWheel and con of the electric skateboard usually is the remote issue. On a OneWheel, you don't have a remote. It's just the board. You don't have to worry about charging it. On the electric skateboard, you have to have this little remote in your hand, so you need to keep track of it, and you also need to keep that thing charged as well. I will say on the Possway, this thing, the remote stays charged incredibly well. You're gonna charge your board 4 or 5 times before you're ever gonna need to charge the remote, so that hasn't been an issue, but it is just a difference. In the same vein of the difference in needing the remote, that also is gonna bring in acceleration and braking. So on the OneWheel, you basically just lean forward to accelerate forward. On an EV skateboard, you're gonna use the remote to actually like use a trigger or something like that to get yourself to accelerate forward. And then for braking on the skateboard, you're gonna pull back on that trigger or whatever kind of remote that you have. And on the OneWheel, you're just gonna lean back. And the more aggressively that you lean back or jump off, you're gonna stop. And on the skateboard, it's really up to the type of skateboard of how well it's gonna brake. I tried an electric skateboard probably 5 years ago, was terrible at braking. Took over 100 feet from full speed to a dead stop. This Possway skateboard that I have stops incredibly fast. Like you have to brace yourself if you want to slam that brake on. It obviously can stop slower as well, but has very good brakes. I will say now that I have both side by side, I do find myself defaulting to the skateboard a lot more than the OneWheel, and it's just because I'm more confident on the skateboard than I am the OneWheel. If I didn't have the luxury of both of them, then of course I would use the OneWheel. But when I'm sizing them up side by side, I kind of default to the skateboard a lot. I'm much more comfortable riding the skateboard than I am the OneWheel. One other huge item, well, this could be huge depending on who you are and what you like to do. But I also had some people inform me on my last OneWheel video, and I'm very thankful for this, about OneWheel's parent company, which is called Future Motion. Right to Repair might be new to you. I don't have super strong opinions about it, but I will say this. I am a tinkerer. I like to tinker, take things apart, modify stuff. With a OneWheel, if that's something you like to do, you're not gonna be able to do that. OneWheel's product is very locked down, and that is their business. But I want to let you know up front that I learned after buying that product that I basically cannot do any modification to it without actually bricking the controller. So what they have set up is that if I disconnect the battery, that controller is going to brick and the OneWheel is basically useless. That was discouraging for me to find out. Now, OneWheel is going to say this is totally safety related because of the battery and whatnot. I come from a background of building drones and stuff, and I have a lot of experience with lithium batteries. I know they can be volatile, and if you use common sense, you're going to be just fine. But OneWheel over the years has slowly cracked down on people modifying the product, and some people really don't like that. So I just want to let you know, be totally honest, I didn't know that in my first review. So I'm letting you know that now, that if you go the OneWheel route, if you're somebody that doesn't like to tinker, doesn't care, whatever, then you're gonna be fine. If you have an issue, you ship the board back, and hopefully they take care of you. But if you modify it, which is very hard to do, that's also going to give you issues. And basically now it looks like the connection between the controller and the motor and the battery, that all that stuff is encrypted and serialized. So they've really locked the product down. This electric skateboard that I'm using just uses a regular battery connector from I'm used to back in the drone days. I think it's called an XT60 connector. I'll put it here if it's called something different. But that gives me hope for, like, you could attach basically any battery to this thing and you could mod it out however you want. Now, that's also how Future Motion used to be in the very beginning. So Possway, who makes the skateboard, they also could change that as they go forward. They could start locking their products down with software updates and things like that, kind of like OneWheel did. This is a pretty minor difference that has a solution, and I don't think this is gonna make up your mind, but I just wanted to let you know the OneWheel has lights built in, has a white light for the side that's going forward and a red light for the side that's facing backwards when you're riding. And if you switch on the board, so if you're going forward, stop, and then go backwards, the lights will also change color. So white to red and red to white. The skateboard that I currently have has no lights on it. So at night, that is definitely an issue. I picked up some lights on Amazon and strapped them on. That's not the best because that's just other things that you have to worry about charging and keeping track of. But I did want to mention at least the skateboard that I'm using as a comparison does not have any lighting for nighttime riding. In my experience, the OneWheel has a much steeper learning curve, but once you get it, it's totally fine. The skateboard, a lot easier. I'm way more comfortable putting someone who's never had any experience with both onto the skateboard, putting the remote in that beginner mode, handing it to them and just letting them go. The OneWheel, I'm much more nervous about them falling off, not because of the board, but just because of them, because I know how challenging it was for me to start. So bigger learning curve on the OneWheel for sure versus the skateboard. These days, there are tons of manufacturers of electric skateboards, and it's hard to know who's going to be good and who's not long-term since these companies have not been around for a while. I will say OneWheel by Future Motion, they have been around for a while, and it seems that their batteries are very good. That was one thing on a skateboard I had ages ago. You know, I rode it for a few months and the battery just ended up dying on me. I was like, well, this was a really expensive skateboard. Thankfully, the company had a warranty and we ended up working it out. But that is a concern these days with who's actually producing electric skateboards now that it seems like the biggest player has gone bust. So keep that in mind. I think the OneWheel, they have a pretty good reputation when it comes to their pieces and parts and wear and tear, just not so much with the right to repair stuff. One other thing to keep in mind, if you're going to be commuting and you don't have an easy place to charge, and if you're going to maybe want to go long distances, once the OneWheel is dead, that's it. There's no riding it. It's done. You now have to carry it around. And mine, which is the Pint X, weighs 30 pounds. Very heavy. That kind of sucks. But I've never had that happen to me. I've always been able to plan and charge it, and the battery lasts an incredibly long time. But it just depends on your situation. The skateboard, it's like if that thing dies, it's still a longboard. So it may not be quite as easy to push as a regular longboard, but you can still ride it. You wouldn't be totally stranded as you would be with the OneWheel if it died. Before I close this video out, if you are interested in the electric skateboard, let me just give you a quick little rundown of this specific electric skateboard that I'm using. So one of the things that I like most about it is that it has an auto on feature. So if the remote is on, you just start pushing the board, it turns on, you're good to go. So there's no like pressing a button, not pressing a button. I find that great. The remote itself, so I'm not a huge fan of the remote. I love the OneWheel that you don't have to have a remote, but this one, of course, because it's an electric skateboard, you have a remote. The screen can be hard to see in the sun. I will say this specific make and model, the speedometer seems very accurate. I've had some issues with the odometer, but Possway is sending me a new remote to test out. Generally, it seems accurate, but every now and then it seems to jump a mile or take a little bit longer for it to go another mile. I have not been able to figure it out or any rhyme or reason to why it's doing that. But generally the speed is dead on. I've checked it with a GPS speedometer and it seems to be very accurate. This skateboard is incredibly powerful. If you put this thing in pro mode and you slam on the acceleration, it's a ton of fun. Hang on, because it's got lots of power and lots of speed. And again, the top end speed of this thing is very high. For me, I got up to 25 miles an hour, which was uncomfortable, and I do not cruise at that speed. I find myself cruising about 16 miles an hour. I love that speed. And on the OneWheel, I'm not comfortable at 16 miles an hour. I usually cruise 10 to 12 miles an hour on the OneWheel. So comfortably riding, I can go a much further distance in the same amount of time on the skateboard versus the OneWheel if I'm at my comfortable cruise speed. But I just wanted to give you total honesty of the things that I found out. I still really enjoy riding the OneWheel. I think I'm probably gonna end up selling it just because I'm more comfortable on the skateboard. But again, I can't decide for you. I think that when it comes to the cost value for me of being able to get an electric skateboard these days, that is just really cheap. The prices come down so much and I feel more comfortable on it. I lean towards the skateboard. The OneWheel still a ton of fun. If you want to do trail riding, amazing. They do awesome stuff. It really is an incredibly fun product. So it really is going to depend on what you're going for. I think range and speed is kind of a wash. You're really gonna be looking at if you can go off-road and if you need something that's very nimble. If those things are important to you and you don't mind the cost, absolutely OneWheel. But if those things, like me, aren't as important, then go out there and look for an electric skateboard because they have come down tremendously. I know that this is like 10 years late. The boosted board was a fad and that thing totally died and went bankrupt. But if you're still interested in an electric skateboard, give yourself a search. I will link in the description the one that I'm using. And as I keep using it, I'm gonna do a review, but this is kind of my initial comparison of the OneWheel versus an electric skateboard. I hope this video was helpful in you making your decision between the two. If you've got other pointers or things that you like, the OneWheel versus other EVs, even a scooter or a skateboard, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear back from you. Thank you so much for watching Break It Yourself. Don't forget to thumbs me up, and we will see you next time.